Hi, I'm Shannon Dill, and welcome to Wednesday webinars. Today we're going to be talking about Got Milk, Are Dairy Goats a Good Fit for Your Farm? With Megan Purdue, Extension Agent on the Lower Eastern Shore. You can see here a list of a couple of our upcoming webinars, and you can go back and look at archived webinars at extension.umd.edu/women in ag. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors and collaborators of the program. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
The Associate in Agriculture on the Lower Eastern Shore. I'm based out of Worcester County, Maryland. I've been raising dairy goats it started off as 4-H projects for my nieces and nephews. So it's been closing in on 15 years now, and they're long gone out of 4-H, and I'm still raising the dairy goats, probably more into it now than I was then. But I do a lot of work with goats. So what I'm going to talk about today is whether or not dairy goats are a good fit for your farm, whether you already have goats and want to add in dairy goats, or if you don't have any goats and you want to just get goats and you're thinking about dairy goats. There are some pros and cons, so we'll talk about those as we go along. All right, so why would you choose dairy goats? There's a couple of different reasons why, and when we talk about dairy goats, we're mostly talking about does or female goats. So the biggest thing that people look at when they're looking for dairy goats is they want milk for their family. So a typical dairy goat, depending on how you manage it, can produce anywhere from a half to around a gallon of milk per day. When you get into the higher production goats that are intensively managed, they can maybe go up to almost 2 gallons per day at peak production. But for the typical person, they're looking at a production of around half to a gallon of milk. Some people will choose them for pets. They're a good option for pets because they're a friendly breed. Most of the breeds that we use for dairy goats are very friendly, and we've chosen them like that because they have to have a lot of human interaction. We're interacting with dairy goats at least twice a day while they're milking, so they need to be good around people. So they will make good pets. They're also good 4-H projects. So if you have a smaller child just starting off in 4-H, you want a smaller livestock project such as a goat, and then a dairy goat's going to be easier to handle because we do handle them a lot every day. Some people will choose to get a couple of dairy goats so they can stockpile milk. So if you raise meat goats or even sheep, you can freeze the milk and you can use it for bottle babies. So anytime you have an orphan baby or if you have multiples and the mom can't feed them all, you can use the frozen milk, just thaw it out, warm it up, and you have it ready for bottle babies. And then some people will add them into a production system to increase the milk production of their replacement does. So a higher producing milk doe or milk meat doe cross is going to produce faster growing kids because they have a lot more milk production than, say, a purebred boar goat. So these does are also capable of raising larger litters, whereas a boar might do well with 2 kids. A goat that has some dairy lines in it might be able to easily raise 3 kids. So there's a bunch of different breeds. When you're looking into getting dairy goats, there's a bunch of different breeds that you can choose from, and I'm going to go over the most popular ones that are easily available. And one of the most popular ones right now is in the Nigerian dwarf. Because it's a miniature breed, the kids are super tiny and super cute. They come in all different colors. These goats have erect ears, so their ears go straight out to the side. They're not pendulous like the Nubian. So they make a popular pet breed because of their size. And then another way that people will use these is they'll cross them with other standard size dairy goat breeds to produce a smaller goat. So a lot of people will cross these with Nubians to make what they call miniature Nubians, which are somewhere in between the size of a Nigerian dwarf and a full-size Nubian. Or even a La Mancha. La Mancha's, the small ears are dominant, so if somebody likes the look of a La Mancha but doesn't necessarily want that size, you can cross them with a Nigerian dwarf to make a miniature of that breed. However, the small size can be a liability for some people. It can make it uncomfortable for you to work with. So if you have a bad back, this might not be the greatest goat for you because you're going to have to bend down to work with them. Even getting them up on the stand, you may need to have a taller stand. When you milk them, they're going to have smaller teat size than some of the standard breeds. So some people might not like the small size because it's difficult for them to work with. The Oberhasli is one of the standard size breeds, but it's on the smaller end of the standard size. The one disadvantage with this breed is if you like a lot of variety in your goats, you're not going to get it with this one because they all come in that same color, the deep reddish brown, a little tiny bit of variation in the browns with those black markings. Occasionally you'll get an all black one, but those go for quite a high price because they're rare. It's not necessarily a great thing for the breed, but people do love the all black one because it's something different. Like the Nigerian dwarf, they have erect ears. There's almost no variation in the markings, and this is probably not one that you would want to cross with a meat breed because they do tend to be smaller than some of the other standard sized goats. Another one of the oldest breeds is the Toggenburg. Again, this one doesn't have a huge amount of variation in color. So if you like a lot of color, this is probably not going to be one that you'd want. They have the Swiss markings. They have erect ears as well, and they're a large standard breed. One thing about these is they may be hard to find depending on the area you live in. I know in this area, there are almost no Toggenburgs. We have one 4-H'er that has one that he had to drive several hours to get. I grew up with the Toggenburg. Back in the 90s, we had a Toggenburg, but I don't think I've actually seen them other than the one at the county fair since then in our area. The Saanen is an all-white goat. Again, not a lot of variation, but these were once considered the Holstein of the dairy goat world. They're a very large breed. They are known for their high production. If you get one with non-white markings, that depending on how big they are, that's considered a fault for the breed. If the goat comes out colored in its full Saanen, they call that a sable. So it has its own separate registration. But so this one might be easier to find at a cheaper price if you find one with markings, so it's a fault. The breeder might sell that one at a discount because they don't want to show that one if they're a show farm. Another large breed is the Alpine. The Alpine comes in all different colors. The one that's shown in the picture is what I think of when I think of Alpine color, but they come in a variety of colors. So if you like a lot of variety, this might be a good breed to choose. They again they're a very large breed. They have the erect ears. I do find them to be a little bit more hard to handle, so not maybe a good option for a timid child. They can be a little bossy out in the field. So it just depends on whether or not you like that personality. It's either a love or hate relationship with La Manchas for most people because they have the very small ears. The photo of the black kid in this slide those are gopher ears. Those are the smallest ears that a La Mancha can have, and that's what you want on a La Mancha, especially a purebred one. Now the goat in the slide in the corner is a La Mancha Nubian cross. She has what's called elf ears, so those are a little bit longer. Those are not the desired ears, though, for a La Mancha. You want the gopher ears. These La Manchas can come in any color. They can be spotted, they can be black, they can be tan, they can be any variation. They're a very friendly goat, but these are a little bit smaller of the standard breeds. So they're going to be smaller than the Alpine, smaller than the Saanen. So they're on the smaller end for the standard breed, but still a standard breed. One of the most popular breeds for dairy goats is the Nubian. So these have the long pendulous ears. And when you're looking at a purebred Nubian, or there's purebred and there's Americans, but one that's 100% Nubian, those ears should extend past the muzzle. So you should be able to wrap the ear along down the face of the goat, and it should go over the entire muzzle of the goat. If you see one where their ears just go down to their jaw, that's not a good breed characteristic for it. They are supposed to have the super long ones. And most likely that animal is mixed with something else. They can come in any color, and they should have a Roman nose. So this one is a very popular cross with boar goats, because by crossing it with boar goats, you get that dairy influence, you get the increased milk production, but you're still retaining the pendulous ears and the Roman nose that the boar goats have. So you're not going to change a lot of the breed characteristic of the boar goat. One big disadvantage with these guys is they're very loud. They might get you in trouble with your neighbors. You might get Child Protective Services called on you if you have Nubian kids and you go out there and you work with them and they start screaming because they sound like a screaming child. So some people cannot take how loud they are. So that is one big disadvantage with them, is their mouth. You can also have a mixed breed of dairy goats, and these work out well depending on your situation. You can mix to get different characteristics, like mixing with a Nigerian dwarf to get a smaller size. In most cases, when you mix two different breeds, you're going to lose the breed character. La Manchas retain a lot more breed character than the other ones seem to when they're mixed, but they're still not they're going to end up with the elf ears, not the gopher ears. One advantage to them is they cost less than purebred does in most cases. So if you're on a budget, you can still get a very nice dairy goat at a cheaper price. The one question that we get is when does the milk come? Some people think you just buy a goat, it's like buying a laying hen and she's just going to start giving milk. That is not the case. As with most mammals, when she gives birth, that's when she goes into milk. And in the dairy goat world, we call that freshened. So when we say a goat is freshened, it means that she's given birth and she's in milk. Drying off refers to letting the goat stop producing milk. So we've eased up on the milking to let her gradually stop producing that milk. The does may produce milk up until their kids are weaned, or once you wean the kids, if you continue to milk her, they can milk up to 1 to 2 months before they kid again. So you can get 10 to 11 months of milk out of a doe per year. Keep in mind that milk production is based on supply and demand. So if a goat only is nursing 1 kid, she's going to produce less milk than a doe that's nursing 2 kids. If you are not milking her out completely, when you start milking her, she's going to stop producing that milk and only milk out what you're taking out. If you decide to just milk her once a day, her milk production is going to decrease. So keep that in mind. And it also is affected by what you feed her. If you're not feeding her enough, she's not going to produce as much milk. And then there are some breeds and some lines of goats that can go through an extended lactation. And this is where you don't breed them every year, but you keep milking those. Some of these can produce well up to 18 months. But again, some goats are capable of this, some are not. And when I talk about that extended lactation, I mean, they're producing a significant amount of milk. I've seen where some people say, oh, my goat has been milking for 18 months and they're only getting a cup a day. Well, that's not worth your time to even go out there and milk them. These goats are going up to that gallon a day for that extended period of time. The one big important thing for dairy goats is their nutrition. Does in milk are working very hard, so they have a higher nutrient requirement for them. So you always want to feed a balanced ration, something that is labeled for goats. Generally is going to meet those nutrient requirements. You want to be feeding high quality hay and a balanced feed. In most cases, they're not going to be able to get all of their nutrients from hay alone. If they are high producing dairy goats, they're going to need that feed in there as well. It's important to monitor body condition scores. I see a lot of times an emaciated goat and people say, oh, it's a dairy goat. Well, dairy goats they're allowed to be thin compared to meat goats, but they should never look emaciated. The 2 does in the picture, those are half sisters. They're the same age. The brown doe produced a single, the black doe produced twins, and they have different body types. The brown doe tends to be a little thicker than the black doe, and this was their first lactation. So usually that first lactation is harder on them, but the brown doe, I was fine with her body condition. The black doe, she was a little too thin for me. So it's important to monitor those. She had a higher demand on her by nursing twins, so she needed a little bit more feed. And if you're ever in doubt about that, because it is a hard thing to learn, ask somebody. So ask an experienced dairy goat owner. You might be able to find somebody with your 4-H clubs, or ask your ag agent, who the ag agent may be able to help you, or they may be able to direct you to someone who can. Because for us in Extension, we can go out to your farm and I could look at your animals and tell you, okay, these look good, these are thin, these are too fat, and then you can adjust your feeding accordingly. So one thing that people want to know is, do they have to be milked after kidding? Well, this is going to depend. Management is very important no matter what you decide to do. So you have different options. You can let the does raise their kids. The one big disadvantage to that is dairy goat kids some of them tend to have very sharp teeth. This can cause a lot of damage to the udders and the teats. So if you're letting the kids nurse on them, you need to watch for that. And then if they're a high producing dairy goat, especially if they've been nursing multiples, you may need to hand milk them after weaning if their production is still high. So if you're weaning the kids at 8 weeks, the production is probably still going to be pretty high. So you're going to have to milk them after you wean the kids. If you can let the kids stay on for 3 months without hurting the doe, then the production may have decreased to the point where you don't have to do that, but it's going to depend on a doe by doe basis. At the very least, you may have to relief milk. So right after kidding, there's a lot of edema in the udder. It makes it hot, swollen, and tight. Some does will not allow their kids to nurse because it hurts. So you may have to go in and relief milk that, or you may have to, just because she's too tight and the kids aren't nursing enough, You can take this milk and freeze it, or this colostrum and freeze it, but be prepared to do that, and you may need to relief milk during weaning. So if she's still high producing, then you may have to relief milk her. One management style that's probably the most popular, most people think of when they think of dairy goats, are bottle-fed kids. So in this system, the kids are removed at birth. This system makes it easy to determine if you have excess colostrum or not. So you're going to milk everything out of the doe. You'll be milking her twice a day. If the kids get plenty of colostrum, then you can take that excess colostrum and store it for emergencies. This is a popular system for biosecurity reasons, specifically CAE, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Because in this system, you can either feed the kids milk replacer, or you can pasteurize the milk before you feed your kids. So if that doe was infected with CAE, it'll kill the virus and not pass it on to the kids. This one prevents damage to the udder, so it's very popular amongst people that show their dairy goats. And you can also maximize your milking potential. So if you have a doe that has a single or a twin, you're going to be milking her out completely, so she may produce more milk than she would have if she was nursing the kids. And then if you don't plan on keeping the kids, you can sell them as bottle babies. So that's less amount of time that you have to keep your kids and manage your kids. Another management style is to let the doe raise her own kids. So the kids are left on the dam. These kids usually grow pretty fast because their moms are producing a lot of milk. And after weaning, like in a meat goat situation, you would let the doe dry off. And there's a lot of potential for damaged udders under the system. So the kids can cut the teats with their sharp teeth, or you can end up with lopsided udders if you have a single, or if you have maybe triplets where the udder is not getting nursed evenly. And then a big problem is if that doe is milking heavy when the kids are weaned, the teats may become blown. And that's what the image on the slide is. That is a doe with a blown teat. And she actually blew both teats. But one of them eventually shrank down and stopped producing milk. The other one remained blown. The problem with this is some people look at it and think, oh, that would be super easy to milk. It's actually very difficult to milk. You have to have a lot of hand strength to milk that. And a newborn kid cannot nurse from a blown teat. The teat is just way too big. They can't nurse from it. So these are not going to be animals that you're going to be able to keep in a production system. The other option is kind of a hybrid among the other two. You can milk the does after the kids are weaned. So you let the doe raise the kids. This means a shorter time commitment for you to have to wean or to have to milk the does. So instead of milking the does for 10 months, you're going to be milking them for 7 to 8 months because the kids will have nursed on them for the first 2 to 3 months. This allows you to still utilize the milk for family use or to freeze the milk for bottle babies down the road. There is still that potential for udder damage from the kids since the kids are nursing on them, but this is less risk of blown teats because as soon as you wean the kids, you're going to start milking her, so she's not going to have too much tightness in the udder. You will probably see reduced milk production with this one because, again, milking is a supply and demand. So as the kids get older, they're going to be eating other stuff. They're going to be eating grain. They're going to be eating hay. The doe's going to start kicking them off more often, so she's going to stop producing as much milk. The advantage to that may be if she's not producing a whole lot of milk, you may just be able to milk her once a day. When you select goats, you got to know what your goals are. So if you want pets, a big advantage to dairy goats is you can get them as bottle babies, and they're already going to love that human interaction. If you buy them while they're still in the bottle, they're going to bond with you a lot better than weaned kids. You can get wethers or castrated males, but if you go that route, if you're looking for a pet and you buy a wether, understand that they will get larger than their sisters. They must be fed properly because they're at high risk for urinary calculi if you do not, especially if you're getting Nigerian dwarfs. And urinary calculi, it's going to cost you probably around $1,000 minimum to save the goat's life, and there's still no guarantee it can happen again. And it is fatal. If it's not treated, it is fatal. So be very careful when you're purchasing wethers for pets. You could also buy a retired female. They're usually going to be less expensive than kids. And then there's less of a time commitment. I know this sounds bad, but you may only have 5 years with a retired female. So if you decide, goats are more than what I thought I could handle, you've got a 5-year commitment versus a 10 to 15-year commitment with a kid. 4-H projects are great use for dairy goats, but if you are selecting a goat for a 4-H project, you need to know what the rules are for all the potential shows the goat may go into. So is ADGA registration required? For a lot of 4-H shows, the child has to own the goat before it is freshened the first time. So by 2 years of age, generally, the child has to own the goat. So a retired goat from another herd probably wouldn't be an option because they've already freshened a couple of times. For this, you want to select does. Does can be shown in most shows for as long as the goat is in production versus a wether, which can only be shown for 1 year up until it's a year old. You want to be careful with breed selection. You want to select a breed that 4-H'er is going to enjoy and can handle. You don't want something that's too big for them to handle. If you have a tall 4-H'er, then a Nigerian dwarf might not be good because they'd have to bend over too much to work with it. If you have a small child, then an Alpine might not be the best choice. So select something that is the right size and has a good temperament to complement your 4-H'er, because they all, like us, they all have different temperaments. So you want to make sure that the child and the 4-H'er can get along. My niece does not get along with my Alpine. They hate each other. The Alpine would go after her for some reason. Now I had another 4-H'er the Alpine loved. So it depends on the child and the goat. You want to look at the moms, the grandmothers, and the daughters on both sides if possible when you're selecting a goat for a 4-H'er. Make sure there's good structure on all of the females in the line, and make sure they all have good udders, because that is going to be passed on to the daughters. If you are crossing with meat goats, you're going to want to choose something that's a large breed. Our meat goat breeds are usually pretty big, so you want to make sure that the females can handle birthing the offspring from like a boar goat or a Savannah. Usually in this situation, your maternal breed is going to be the dairy breed because you want that extra milk production. You need to consider breed characteristics. So if the people buying your goats are going to get turned off by something that has little teeny elf ears, then you don't want to cross it with a La Mancha. If you want to eventually breed back to a high percentage boar, then you would want to choose something with pendulous ears. You'd want to choose the Nubian so that you maintain those breed characteristics. Anytime you cross something with pendulous ears with something with erect ears, you get something called airplane ears, which kind of look like big old Dumbo ears that kind of go halfway. So that's not a big problem if you're sending animals directly from meat. But if you are keeping does to breed back up, then you want something that's going to maintain those breed characteristics. You want good body structure. This is going to, anytime you breed goats, you want good body structure. This is going to be passed on to the kids. And you also want a good udder. I know in the meat goat world, we're not breeding for good udders, but good udders will hold up throughout the years. The kids will be able to nurse from them. A kid can't nurse a blown teat or udders that are too pendulous and drag the ground. So you want a good, nice, high, tight, well-attached udder. And then you need to consider, are you willing to relief milk? If you're not willing to do that, at least relief milk, then you might want to look for does with less milk production potential, maybe something that's already crossed, so that there's that less milk production. And then for this one, a cull from a show herd could be a possibility, because these does, there's usually nothing wrong with them. It's just that they're replacing older does with kids just because the kids have more potential and they're breeding up in their program. If you're looking for a home milker, which is usually the most popular reason why you go for a dairy goat, you need to consider how much space you have. So keep in mind, if you don't already have goats, that you need to have at least 2. So you have to have space at least for 2 of them. And also keep in mind, you're going to have to breed the goats, so they're going to have babies. Most people get attached to the babies, so you might want to have space for at least 4 of them if that's going to be the case with you. Look at what breeds are available in your price range and in your area. If you can't go 3 hours away from home, then you need to look at what's available in your immediate area. Look at the different personalities of them. So if you can interact with different breeds and see if you like their personalities. You want to select from good stock, regardless, even if you have no intentions of showing them, you still want that good stock, because good udders and teats are so much easier to milk than bad ones. And then the teat size is important. For your own comfort, if you're hand milking, you need a longer teat size depending on the size of your hand. I personally don't like something with a huge teat, but I want something comfortable for me. And that actually, the little elf-eared doe is my favorite to milk. She has the best teats. For this one, if you can find a culled doe from a good herd, good healthy herd, there's nothing wrong with her, she's just getting replaced by a kid. That's a good option, because these are already trained to milk on a stand. Usually they know what the milk stand is already. They know what milking is. It is going to take a little bit of adjustment because different people have different milking styles, and the does do get used to individual milking styles. So there might be a little bit of time when they're a little jumpy, but for the most part, they're already trained to do what you need them to do. And then you want to see the udders full and empty. So if you're looking at a doe that has just had babies, there's going to be a lot of edema in that udder. That's not milk. It's going to look like it's got 2 gallons of milk in it, and it may only have a quart. So you want to ask the owner to see the udder full, which usually isn't a problem, but you also want to see it right after they've milked out to see what the size difference is. So when you do get a doe, you need to think of biosecurity. There are 3 specific diseases that we want to watch out for. The first one is CAE, caprine arthritis encephalitis. This can cause a variety of symptoms. A hard udder, which is like a chronic mastitis. We don't want that in a dairy doe, especially because that means that she's not going to be able to produce milk. And then there's an arthritic form that gets them a little bit later in life, which cripples them. Another bad thing to have in a goat. It's going to extremely adversely affect its quality of life. And then there's probably the least likely to be seen, but it is seen, is the encephalitis form, which hits kids and will kill a kid very quickly. The next one is, we call it C. alocasius lymphadenitis. It causes external and internal abscesses. So some goats will have the external abscesses, which are easy to diagnose. Others may have an internal abscess, which your only clue to that in a live goat may be that you can't get weight on it. Another important one to look at is Johne's disease. This is a wasting disease, causes chronic diarrhea. Again, something that we don't want in our dairy goat herds. The important thing to note about all 3 of these is a goat may have them and not show symptoms for several years. So because of this, we'll blood test these does to find out whether they have it or not. And you can do this by either sending blood samples to a private laboratory and doing it yourself, or you can send it to your state diagnostic lab. Most state diagnostic labs can run these samples as well. If you can't pull the blood yourself, generally your veterinarian will be able to do it for you and send it off. So the important thing is to buy from clean herds where they've tested all the adult animals. And if you have any doubt, it's always a good idea once you buy the animals to still test them again yourself. You don't want to test them as kids because their immune systems are developing, but you can test all adult animals, or if you're getting them and you're not sure what their status is, you need to quarantine them and test them and get the results before you let them in your herd. So when we decided we're going to milk, you already have the goats now. You need to milk. There's some supplies that you need to keep on hand. Some make your life easier and some are required. So probably one thing that you think about the most is a milking stand. Milking stands are not necessary, but they will make your life a whole lot easier. I do have one doe that refuses to get up on a stand, so I have to sit on the ground to milk her, and it's not fun, especially when it's raining. They will make your life, it's a lot more comfortable to sit on a stand than it is to sit on the ground, but you can do both. When you select your stand, you want one with a stanchion headpiece and a feed pan, so they just stick their head through and they eat while they're being milked. You need a good milk pail. The stainless steel ones are very popular. If you get one with a lid, that's fantastic because in most cases, especially the time of year when we milk, there's a lot of bugs flying around and they like to fly right into milk. So this allows you to go ahead and slap the lid on the milk pail after you finish milking. You can get the doe off the stand and get her put away, then you can take the milk in the house. Glass jars are also a popular option. They don't work so well when you have a doe that kicks, but you can use glass jars as well. You'll need some sort of udder wash. So that could be soap and water. A lot of smaller producers will use baby wipes, but keep in mind that there's no antibacterial action on a baby wipe. It's just going to clean the dirt off. So if you have a doe with a dirty udder, then you need some like soap and water or a commercial udder wash, which is antibacterial. And then you'll need a teat spray to spray on the udder afterwards to keep bacteria from getting up into the udder and giving the mastitis once you're finished. One of the most popular ones for small producers is a spray called Fight Back in the picture on the bottom. This will last a super long time if you only have a couple of does. It's a chlorhexidine base, so it's antibacterial, and it's also cold, so it closes that orifice up on the teat quicker. If you're not able to keep your hands clean prior to milking and while milking your doe, then you may want to have disposable gloves that you can put on while you milk the doe. One thing that you need to do before you start milking dough is train the does to the stand. You don't want to be wrestling a doe that's never been on a stand when you're trying to milk her. So while you have does on the stand, always monitor them. If the doe jumps off, she can either strangle herself or flip the stand on top of herself. So if they're on the stand and they're locked into that headpiece, then somebody needs to be there with them. One way to train the does to the stand is to feed your kids and your yearlings on the stand before they freshen. So just start going out there even before you breed them, and every day put them on the stand to eat, and they will get used to that routine and they will jump readily on and off the stand. It teaches them that the stand means good things, so they're getting food. And then you can let kids play. Kids like to jump on stuff, so you can let them play. But again, I would do this with supervision, especially if you're dealing with a homemade stand, which tends to be lighter weight than the metal stands, because when they're jumping on and off, they could potentially flip it. So always monitor them if you're letting them play on it. You should be familiar with the milking technique prior to milking for the first time. So hand milking should not be painful for the doe. It's going to be a little painful for you the first couple of times, but it should not be painful for the doe. If you are doing it correctly, it's not going to be painful. You never want to pinch the teats while you're milking. This is going to cause that doe to hate being milked. And most does are only going to stand still while they're eating. So if you have a doe that eats very fast, it may only take her 5 to 10 minutes to eat her regular ration, and you need to be done milking by that time. You can't continue if you give them extra grain so that you can finish milking. That's probably going to give them acidosis and a major bellyache and major diarrhea. So you never want to overfeed them to keep them still. You're going to have to build some strength in your hands. If you have a high production doe that's milking out 1 gallon a day, it's going to be kind of painful. I was milking 4 does a day, twice a day last year. I went away for a couple of days and didn't milk, and my hands started cramping, and I couldn't figure it out. It's because I wasn't milking. My hands weren't getting that exercise they were used to. Yesterday, when I finished up, my forearm, the muscle on my forearm locked up super tight because you are using a lot of muscles in your hands and in your arms while you're milking. This is a good graphic that I don't know where it comes from, but I've seen it on the internet several times. It's showing you the technique. So you want to wash your hands, you want to wash the doe's udder. And if you follow the left-hand size, they show you where they're going to clasp the index finger and thumb around the top of the teat, the base of the udder, and you gradually work your fingers down, squeezing one at a time. Now you're going to do this super quick once you learn the technique, and it's going to be hard to see you doing that, but you will be doing that technique. Once you feel like you've milked most of the milk out, you're not really getting a lot, then you massage the udder. It's going to release more milk down towards the teats. You can finish milking it out. When you finish, then you dip the teats. The bottom right hand is showing you, I know it's written very small, but it's showing you not to milk like that. That pinch and strip, you don't want to do that to your goats. When you're milking, some does are going to be hairier than others. And if you're milking for your own home use, I would definitely suggest shaving their udders and a lot of their rear end before you have to start milking them, because especially this time of year, they're going to be shedding a lot, and those hairs will fall right down into your milk. So do that way ahead of time. You want to shave it super, super close, but have that done before you need to start milking. You want to get all your supplies together and get them close by the stand. Get the doe up on the stand and make sure it's in an area where she has some privacy. So you don't want other animals or children or their kids to be loose, because it's going to make her start dancing around on the stand. She's going to be worried about fighting for her food, and she's not going to stay still for you. Go ahead and give her the feed, but only a quantity that she's used to. And then if she is producing more and she's losing weight, then you can gradually increase the amount that she needs if you need to. You want to wash the udder, get all of the dirt and loose hairs off of it. And then the first thing you do when you start milking is you're going to strip the teats. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that the milk looks normal. If there's any clumps or any blood or pink streaks in it, then she might have some mastitis coming on. She's going to need to be treated. And then the other reason we do it is that first squirt is where most of the somatic cells are. So if you're in a commercial dairy, they're only allowed to have a certain level of somatic cells in their milk. Otherwise, the milk could be rejected. They really don't mean a whole lot. In cattle, they mean that they're probably getting mastitis. They don't mean as much in dairy goats, but that's where most of those somatic cells are. So we just strip the teats out. get rid of that, and we start milking the dough. You want to milk her out quickly. Don't waste time while you're doing it, especially if she's a fast eater. Don't play on your phone, although sometimes I have a phone in one hand and milk with the other hand. But you want to milk her out quickly. This is not a time to have a lot of conversations or mess with other animals. And once you're finished, make sure you spray and dip the teats with an antibacterial spray or dip. So this is just an actual picture of, I think it was me milking. I found it fascinating. I was just snapping pictures really quick. And if you show them all together, you can see my hands gradually, each finger closing down on the teat as I was milking. You are going to encounter difficult does or an inexperienced doe that's just not been milked before. These does are going to kick and they're probably going to knock over your milk. And when they talk about don't cry over spilled milk, this is why, because you may cry, especially if you've been working hard trying to get that milk. So for this, I would recommend using a small bottle. I like the 20-ounce soda bottles because I can hold them in one hand and milk one teat with the other hand. That way she can't kick it over on me, and if she does, it's not all going to spill out. This I use a lot with if I just need to relief milk a doe that's just kidded, or if I need to get some colostrum off her, or if her kids aren't nursing properly and I need to give them some of her milk with a bottle. And this is what I'll do. But if you're on the stand and they're really not cooperating with you, you can use this to get them milked out until they get used to it and start behaving. You always want to handle the does prior to freshening if you plan on milking them, so that their first encounter with you handling them is not while they're being milked. Make it a routine for them. They know that it's not a bad thing for you to handle. The only time you've ever handled them is to throw them down and trim their hooves, or give them a vaccination, or shove medicine down their throat. They're not going to cooperate with you when you go to try to milk them. These does don't have to be super friendly to be good milkers. I have one doe that I can never get a hold of. She stays as far away from me as she can, but she's a trained milker. So all I have to do is open the gate and say, Mary, do you want to milk? She runs to the gate, runs past me, and jumps on the stand and gets ready to be milked. Now, when it's time to take her off and put her away, I can't just turn her loose and let her go back because I won't be able to catch her again. I do have to hold on to her when I take her to be put away. But she is not a friendly goat, but she is a great milker. She's probably one of my best milkers. So when they're on the stand, they got to learn good things come on the stand. So feed and that relief from that full udder, and they're going to quickly learn that it's a good thing and they won't dread it. They'll love getting on the stand. My goats fight to get on the stand when I go to milk them. Some things to consider if you are considering getting a dairy goat, or if you have one. If you own a dairy goat, you should at least know how to milk. Even if you're letting them raise the kids, you should at least know how to milk, because at some point you're probably going to have to relief milk. Regardless of the management you choose, you need to be willing to do that relief milk. But you can take advantage of the excess milk and colostrum and freeze it for orphans or for does that have too many kids and they can't feed them all. Once you start milking, you have to be consistent. So it has to be done every day, the same times. If you're going to go on vacation, you need to have a plan for somebody to come and milk your does. So that might be something to keep in mind. Time your kiddings around, or your milking around when you're going to go on vacation, so you don't have does and milk during that time. You need to choose that management that fits your lifestyle and that you can maintain. Don't start milking a doe when you know you can't do it twice a day, every day, until she goes out of milk. So choose one that's going to fit into your lifestyle. When you have dairy goats, it's going to be a time commitment, but there's going to be a lot of benefits to it. So they're very entertaining, friendly goats. You get that fresh milk, so you can either, if your family drinks a lot of milk, there's fresh milk there. Some people really love the taste of fresh goat's milk. You can use it for other things like soap or making your own cheeses. You can freeze it, especially if you have other livestock. You can freeze that milk and use it for orphans. Some people will even use it for rehabilitating wildlife and for puppies. And that you can breed these dairy does into a meat goat system. The increased milk production of your maternal breeds and your moms in your system is going to produce faster growing kids. So if you're in a situation where you're breeding market kids for show, these can produce excellent market kids because they're going to grow really fast, and you can take advantage of that fast growth for the first 3 months. So I can take any questions if you have them. This is my my normal contact information. I'm working from home right now, but a normal day I would be in Snow Hill. Today I'm in Salisbury.
All right, I went ahead and put Megan's email here in the chat. Looks like we've got some questions. Let's see here. Are there any questions for Megan? You can use the chat. Let's see. I think that was more about our mics.
Oh, I see one.
Yeah, can you read it?
Yeah, the little automatic milkers, you have to be very careful with those. Because I've seen them too. You're probably thinking about the ones that cost around $100. Those can, from what I understand with those have a high risk of damaging the udders because they don't pulsate. It sounds like they're more of a straight suction, and you want something that's going to pulsate. So I would be very, very careful about those. I have looked, because I was considering getting an automatic milker myself. It looks like some people will refurbish like a cow milking system to make it fit for a home milker. Those are a little bit better, but you want to be very careful. You don't want something that's going to do a straight suction because that's going to damage the teats on the goat.
We've got a couple questions in the Q&A regarding CAE. A negative test doesn't guarantee an animal will always be negative. Is there any point to continue testing other than if you're selling purebred stock?
It depends on what you're, let me try. I'm trying to open that up. Here it is. It depends on who you're marketing to. So if you're selling your animals for the babies for meat, then there's really no point in continuing to test. It also depends on the ages of your animals. I like to test them for at least, if I'm constantly adding new stock, then I'd say you need to, if you want to deem your herd as CAE free, then you're going to have to continue to constantly test new stock and young stock. But it depends on who you're marketing to. If you're marketing to other dairy goat people, the show world, they're going to want to see those CAE negative test results. If, like I said, if you're selling most of your kids for meat, those people are not going to care whether you're CAE negative or not. So it's going to be your personal preference. I personally want to monitor mine, so I make sure so I know what to expect, and I want to keep everybody in good health. If somebody comes up positive, then they're probably going to get culled. I've not had one come up positive, but I do understand there's a lot of unknowns with CAE, but it depends on who your buyer is. So a lot of people with pets don't care, but more and more people seem to care about it than they did 10 years ago. And you also get what you pay for. So if you're not charging high prices for your goats, then you don't have to test one way or another, but it just depends on who you're selling to.
Great. And there's another question. I'm super new and I'm interested in getting into goats. Should I start taking a course with a nearby farmer? So any information about, continuing education on this topic, Megan?
Right now is an excellent time to get education from those of us who work in extension, because we have to do everything online right now. So it's a good time to start getting some education. Getting a good book can help you out a lot. Be careful with it though. I think the stories guides that are sold probably most Tractor Supplies, they're pretty good. I've not had too many issues with them, and it's any issue somebody has with them is probably going to be debatable. I think if you follow that one, then you're probably going to be in good shape. It's always good to have a mentor. The problem is most people that raise livestock are super busy. So they're not always going to want to have somebody come around and tagging along with them to learn. So your local extension office is going to be your best resource for finding out what's available in your area. Take advantage of the times that we're in right now where everything is offered online. And then also, if you happen to have children, or like I had nieces and nephews and I took them to 4-H meetings, 4-H is an excellent way to learn about livestock. So if you have children and you want to get them involved with the livestock, putting them in a livestock club, a 4-H livestock club is going to be a good way to learn because the whole family can learn together. Or if you have nieces or nephews and you want them to get involved with it, then you can take those and you just go to the 4-H meetings with them and you can learn from other families, or sometimes the 4-H leader will bring people in to teach about a subject area. But again, it depends on the area that you're in. Don't be offended if a farmer doesn't want to teach you. It's just most of us raise livestock because we'd rather be around animals than people. So it's nothing personal. It's just either they're busy or they don't want to be, they're not really a people person. But at the same time, when you do buy animals, you want to buy them, especially as a new goat owner, you want to buy them from somebody who is willing to support you for a little while after you get them. Somebody who's going to answer your questions for at least those first couple of weeks. I know when I sell an animal, I would rather them come back to me with questions than to say later on that they lost the animal for something that I could have told them how to fix. So buy from somebody who's going to give you a little bit of support for at least the first few weeks after you get the animal home. They're going to talk to you about what to do to get it ready for the animal, how to feed it. You don't want to be in a situation where you're getting new animals where they just want your money and you leave. Buy them from somebody who's asking you questions. They should be asking you, well, what's your experience? Are you ready for them? You're getting at least 2.
So I did post in the chat, Penn State has, they're quite set up for online courses, given the size of their state and number of producers. So they do have some free courses online. I put that in there. They've got a number of grazing and sheep and goat classes. I know Megan's got some coming up, and you can watch our event site on UMD to get more information. We've got another one about udders and buying kid, older does, what to look for in udders. What makes a good udder?
Okay, so if you're getting a kid, you're obviously not going to know what its udder is going to turn out looking like. So that's where we look at the mom. If the grandmom's available, sometimes, especially if it's a show herd with dairy goats, they'll have pictures of the grandmother, maybe the great grandmother, usually on both sides. With a buck, you can't tell much by looking at a buck. So we look at his mom, we might look at his daughters. But what you're looking for is an udder that stays up nice, high, and tight, kind of round, and you shouldn't be able to see where it attaches to the body wall. Like you shouldn't see that pull down on it. It should look like they call it a socked on udder. So it looks like you cut, maybe the best way to, I guess I can explain it is, looks like you took maybe a volleyball, cut it in half, and just like glued every little bit of that edge up around that dough. You don't want something that's hanging down. Call those a pendulous udder. I think I showed a picture of the one with the blown teeth. She has a very pendulous udder where you can see it looks like the neck of a balloon that's been stretched out. Where you can see that knot up, where on a balloon you'd be able to see that knot up at the top. Like if you were to fill a water balloon and then hold it by the knot, and you can see like the neck of the balloon. You don't want to see that. You want to see like something like you cut a ball in half and you just stitched it straight to the udder, if that makes sense. And you're going to look at teats. You want the teats to be what they call plumb. So they're gonna stick straight down. They're not going to be angled out or forward or backward. When they drop, they hang straight down. And then the size is going to make a difference for you. Some goats tend to have a wider diameter teat than others. So if you have a small hand, you're going to want to look for does with a smaller diameter teat. It's going to be more comfortable for you to milk. I have a variety. My Alpine has a wider diameter teat. She's not the worst one to milk, but my little La Mancha Cross is a much easier one because the diameter of her teat is much smaller. So that's the kind of stuff. And if you have any more questions, I could probably email me and I could probably send you, I can find some pictures to send you so you know what I'm looking at. And one thing that I told 4-Hers to look, if you want to know what a good udder looks like and you want to know how to pick a good animal for that breed, is go to find out who the national winner was for that breed. So every year, maybe not this year, but every year there's a national dairy goat show. They take fancy pictures of the does and they usually show a picture of their udder. So if you look at the pictures of the national champions, that's the ideal for that breed. So those are going to have excellent breed character and excellent udders. That's the way they get to be a national champion. So if you look at those pictures, that's going to show you what the best is, and get that kind of in your mind so that when you go to a farm to look, that's what your standard now is. You get used to looking at those nice specimens, so it's easier for you to recognize a bad one when you're used to looking at the good ones. So if you're not familiar with goats, look at those national champions, so you get in your mind what they should look like, and you can compare it when you actually go see a goat in person.
That's great, Megan. Thank you. Another question is about mixing goats and cows, I guess in a grazing system or on a farm, and looking at making some value-added products from goat milk, and any thoughts on products?
You can mix species. They can complement each other, especially when we look at like things like grazing habits and parasite control. Goats and cows are very complementary. The one thing is, I would still, unless you're raising the cow with the goats from a calf, they can do a lot of damage to each other. A cow could kill a goat. So you're thinking of them being friends, that may or may not work out. It's always going to be better for each species to have another animal of the same species. It's going to help it adjust better. It's going to give it a friend that is a safe friend. I have cows that run with my sheep, and the cows think that they are cutting horses, and the sheep are terrified of them. So the sheep stay away. They stay in the other end of the farm than the cows do. But when they cross paths, the sheep generally get the short end of the stick. If you're looking at value-added products, you got to be very careful about what you can do, what's legal to do in your state. One popular thing to do with goat's milk is to make soap, because in most areas you can do that without a lot of regulation. Cheese is probably the next thing that you could do without a huge amount of regulation, but again, you got to look at what you're allowed to do within your state and see if you can meet those requirements or not. In most states, if you want to sell like goat's milk, you have to be from a graded dairy. And most of us don't have, several $100,000 to sink into building a facility that will meet those requirements. So I'd look at what you are allowed to do in your state. Usually the easiest thing to do, and one of the more popular ones, is the goat milk soap. Those are getting more and more popular, and I imagine it will continue in popularity because you can make a variety of scents. There's a lot of companies that will sell materials for it. So they'll sell the different oils that you put in to make the soap, and a bunch of different scents, but also we're seeing a lot of increase in interest in essential oils. So those can be added into soaps and make an excellent soap. All right.
I'm looking to see if I don't think there's any more questions on here. I think I got to all of them. Any other? Somebody was asking about books to start reading. A lot of the 4-H, it depends on where you are. Tractor Supply in our area has been getting better about keeping a good selection of books. Again, I like the stories guides. There's a stories guide to raising dairy goats, and the newest edition of it, I think, has a pretty good instructions on actually milking, and it comes in color too, which is a benefit. I think this is the first edition that comes in color. It's Stories, STOREYS, and they have a whole line. They have Stories Guide to Raising Horses and Ponies.
They've got backyard chickens, they've got chicken diseases. They're all written by different people, but those are a little bit more vetted than just an individual random book. And they're easier to, they're written on a level that's easy to understand. So an older child can read them all the way up through an experienced adult. So I like the style that they're written in. They're easy to understand, and they're pretty good. Other than that, some of the, they may sell 4-H and FFA books. Those are usually pretty good because those are put out through universities. You can also go online, and anything that comes, there's a lot of fact sheets that come from universities such as ours. So you want to look for, if you're looking online for vetted material, it's going to come from a .edu website. That means it's usually, if it's animal related, livestock related, it's going to come from a land grant university in most cases. So you can look for that .edu. Other than that, be very careful about what you find online. Our sheep and goat specialist has the website sheepandgoat.com. So all of her stuff has been vetted. So you want, and by vetted, I mean that, like, when we write a fact sheet, it has to go through 3 other people, 1 within our university and 2 people outside of our university who have extensive experience with that subject matter, who are going to review it and make sure that it's all valid. Other than that, getting on Facebook is extremely dangerous when you're new to animals, because you can get some really good information, you can get some really bad information, because everybody has an opinion on there and they all think that they're correct. And some things that work on some people's farms might be working on their farms and they might not work on yours. So be very careful. And that person usually doesn't know that. They think because it works for them that it'll work for everybody. So be very careful if you get any information off of Facebook.
That's great advice, Megan. One more question. Can you explain what stripping the teat means?
So stripping the teat, there's always going to be a little bit of milk. Like, you're never going to get every last drop of milk out of an udder. So there's always going to be some milk, and usually that milk that's in the teat is what we call strip out. So it's just that first squirt of milk out of the teat. We don't want to pinch the teat, and I think the terminology comes from cattle, where they kind of do that more of a pinching technique. But we call it stripping because in a commercial dairy herd, before they attach all the automatic milkers, they go and they strip every teat, and they get that first squirt of milk out of there. They make sure that, again, that it looks fine, that there's no clumps in it, there's no red streaks, there's no blood. And again, it also has a lot of somatic cells in that first squirt of milk. So by getting that out, it's going to lower the somatic cell count of the rest of the milk. So that's we're just getting that stripping the teat just refers to that first squirt of milk from each teat. And I do see another question. Are internal parasites an issue with dairy goats if they're kept in a dry lot and not browsing? Actually, browsing is very good for keeping parasites out of goats in general, because browsing is them eating up off the ground. The internal parasites only travel about 2 to 3 inches up a blade of grass. So it's goats that are grazing are have the greatest issues with internal parasites. If you keep them in dry lot and they don't have a parasite issue when they go into dry lot, they're not going to have nearly the parasite issues that a goat that's out on pasture will have. And generally speaking, we recommend dry lot for severe parasite issues. So that's one of the management ways that we can deal with parasites, is to pull them off of pasture and put them in a dry lot. And when we talk about dry lot, that means there's nothing growing in there, no weeds, not a 1/4 inch of grass. It's just dirt or some sort of concrete, gravel. You don't want to have anything green growing in there, because if there's anything growing in there, they're going to eat it. And that's, if there is a parasite issue, there may be infective larvae crawling up that, whatever it is. So you should not, if you have a proper dry lot, you should not have internal parasite issues. But again, they need to come into it without a parasite issue. So if you put them on dry lot and they're full of worms, then they're going to have a parasite issue. But if they're healthy and they don't have a lot of parasites, they're always going to have, if they've ever grazed at all, they're always going to have some parasites. But if they don't have a lot, then you shouldn't have any issues with it.
Great. Thanks, Megan, so much. I really appreciate it. In the chat, Megan's email is there. There's a couple other additional resources. And feel free to reach out to her. She's definitely has a lot of knowledge and experience in this topic. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this.